Hi, listener, welcome back to my channel. Let's continue with the fourth chapter of the novel Till the Last Breath. This chapter is about the character named Kajal Khurana. Kajal paced nervously in her hostel room. The news of Dushyant lying unconscious for 3 days had just reached her. It wasn't the first time she had received such a call. When they were dating, she was used to going to the hospital, picking him up, and cleaning up his shit. But the last such call was 2 years back. Today, she had suppressed the impulse to drop everything and visit him. He wouldn't want to see me, she argued. Do I want to see him? 2 years had passed since the last time they had talked. Kajal dialed the number. Hello, GKL Hospital? Can I talk to the doctor of a patient admitted there? The name is Dushyant Roy. Hold on. The voice from the other side said. The waiting sound piped up. Hello, this is Zara Mirza. 2 summers before this one, Kajal was a second year student and Dushyant was a year senior to her. It wasn't until a few friends pointed it out that Kajal realized she was constantly being stared at by a senior. It was none other than the swearing, belligerent, infamous drunkard of a senior with a penchant for getting into trouble, Dushyant Roy. Kajal hadn't noticed his stealthy moves earlier, but slowly she started to spot him everywhere. She hadn't made much of him earlier and thought of him as one of the many roadside ruffians from the mechanical department. Little did the rich daddy's girl know that he was going to change her life forever. Forever began on the day Kajal was sitting idly in the library, looking blankly outside the window. Kajal looked at the open grounds of Delhi Technological University and felt disconnected. 2 years had passed since she had started studying electronics engineering and felt more delusioned with every day that passed. She wasn't meant for Schrödinger equations and Fourier transforms, like many others studying with her. While many had resigned themselves to their fate as engineers for life, Kajal still believed she would be something more. At least she hoped. People with money can always do that. Hope, change careers, do crazy expensive things, and call themselves travelers after buying travel packages to posh European countries and staying in beautiful resorts. Though Kajal had never been that type, she was just directionless. Her latest direction was to turn to writing. She had always been a voracious reader. From Sweet Valley High, The Hardy Boys, Enid Blyton when she was young, to David Baldacci, Dan Brown, Nicholas Sparks when she got older, to the heavier works of authors like Mohsin Hamid and V.S. Naipaul. She had read it all. She picked out a corner in the library and started to read from the page she had folded the day before. It was the latest book by Nicholas Sparks. Like every other girl, she had spent countless nights crying to his books, even though she steadfastly maintained that she wasn't into romance novels and that she had never been a fan of Indian authors and their amateurish love stories set in engineering colleges. Hi, she heard a voice from behind her. She turned around to see the guy who had been following her around college for the last few days, standing just over her shoulder. Her first feeling was of revulsion. His hair was tousled carelessly, his clothes looked like he hadn't changed in days, and his 4-day beard just looked annoying. He wasn't that tall, maybe 5'10" or 5'11", or even taller. She couldn't tell because he was well built for his frame. She imagined an Indian Vin Diesel. Not her type, she liked leaner men, like Edward Norton, like Imran Khan, maybe a little darker. Yes? Do you mind if I sit there? He asked. and pointed to the seat next to Kajal. Kajal hesitated and he took the seat before she could respond to the question. Rude, she thought. She liked that. I have read that book, he said. It's just like the last one. The girl dies and everyone cries. All his books are the same. I don't know why girls still like him. They are so predictable. I didn't need to know that, Kajal retorted. She started reading mindlessly. She forgot which paragraph she was on. It didn't matter. A little later, she said, even if it's the same book, the people are different, and so are the emotions. It's an entirely new experience every time. You wouldn't understand. I don't expect you to. As a matter of fact, I do. That is why I read all of them. Well, initially I just read one because I saw you reading it and thought we would have something to talk about. I ended up reading all of them, he claimed. You are such a girl, she giggled. He nodded approvingly. She wouldn't have guessed that the guy who sat next to her shared the same taste for books as hers. She would learn later that he didn't. Dushyant had always been more interested in books that took him beyond the realm of the obvious. He read books people hadn't heard about, a memoir of a serial killer, an out of point trilogy about a deranged doctor, and more. Her eyes roved around nervously as an uneasy silence hung between them. He looked sturdy. The veins in his forearms were consistently thick and they disappeared inside his t shirt, which fit him snugly. He was undeniably muscular. He smelled very strongly of cologne, as if he had tried to look presentable at the last moment. He could have shaved at least. Dushyant, he said and struck his hand out. Kajal, she said and felt his hand hanging midair. He retracted it, blushing. He didn't meet her eye. She could tell he was nervous. His legs shook. Kajal started reading again, the same paragraph over and over. Dushyant sat there looking at her and at his palms, rubbing them together, looking here and there, shifting his feet and fidgeting with his phone. I have been following you, he said finally. I have been told that, Kajal responded. For 2 years. 2 years? Creep. Or really sweet? Dushyant had turned beetroot red. He couldn't meet her eyes. Instead, he gazed at his own weathered palms. He looked vulnerable, embarrassed, and needy, maybe even a little high. Kajal let a simple smile slip. Dushyant caught that and blushed a little more. So tell me, what do you read? Kajal asked. 2 years? Dushyant smiled and his eyes lit up like the 4th of July. Quite frankly, his choice in books scared her. They dated for 8 months. They had come a long way from the time they had first met in the library and had talked about books, his warning obsession with weight training, her growing dissatisfaction with her career choice, his problems with his parents, her loving sisters, and last but not the least, his enduring fixation with her. Dushyant was never the perfect boyfriend. Her friends hated him with all their heart, but not as much as her sisters. Kajal was tall, almost 5 foot 5 inches, and never had a hair out of place. One could imagine a news presenter for an idea of what she looked like. Her clothes, understated, were always perfectly matched. She wasn't fond of bright colors and never aimed to stand out. She aimed to soothe. Her fair skin, the defined nose, and the confident walk meant business. She wasn't a pushover. Dushyant was abrasive. He was quarrelsome. He was possessive. It took Kajal 1 month to realize that Dushyant was beyond obsessive, almost to the point of being schizophrenic. He drank too much, he smoked too much, and he loved her too much. He had waited 2 years to tell her he loved her. He swore he would spend a lifetime doing it. Sometimes it was sweet. It looked to her like he cared. On other occasions, she was scared. Not scared that they would break up and never see each other again, but scared of what he would do to her. Within a month, she had changed into someone she didn't recognize anymore. At first, Kajal used to like the little taps Dushyant kept on her. He used to get jealous at the mention of her ex boyfriends, fume at her for spending more time with her friends, chid her for staying out little late, and ask her not to drink in his absence. Kajal found it thoughtful. Who wouldn't? Dushan made her feel wanted, loved, no matter what the time of day, no matter what he was doing. One call from her and he would go running to her. He never let go of her hand, hugged her whenever she needed it, and made love to her like no one else had. Kajal felt like she was enveloped in a protective bubble wrap, something that would absorb anything with the potential to harm her. But soon, the bubble wrap would become suffocating. Kajal loved Dushyant with whatever she had. Their relationship wasn't one of the two hormone charged college students type, but of two mature people who saw themselves together for the rest of their lives. When they lay on the open grounds of their college late in the evening, his rough, gym scared fingers wrapped around hers, she felt complete. As evenings turned into nights, nights into days, and days back into evenings, their love for each other grew. Kajal learned to overlook Dushyant's little flaws. Dushyant always said Kajal had none. Kajal always smiled even when she felt pushed to the edge by her control freak boyfriend. Do you think this will last? Kajal said as Dushyant wrapped his hand around hers in a movie hall. How can it not? Dushyant said and brushed her ears with his lips. He had done that many times since the first occasion, but Kajal still felt the chills run down her spine like the first time. Dushyant wasn't Kajal's first boyfriend, but he was the one she would remember forever. She was sure of that. His touch, the things he said in her ear whenever they were in the back alley of the dark library, the lingering feeling of his hands on her bare stomach, his loving fingers on her creamy inner thighs, the wet, gentle touch of his tongue on her ears. She would never get over them. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Dushyant said as soon as an action sequence ended in the movie and there was silence. The conviction in his voice was very upsetting. It often made her wonder what would happen if, God forbid, they ever broke up. And still you can't quit drinking and smoking for me? I have cut it down a lot. You need a cigarette every hour, Dushyant, she said. You will kill yourself. I am trying. It will take time. You just can't let it go overnight, Dushyant retorted irritably. Kajal never liked to talk about his drinking problem. She loved him, so she had to. But she had had enough. The steroids he took as bodybuilding supplements, the marijuana, the never ending cigarettes, his addictions kept piling up. She didn't know where to begin. If you love me enough, you would have stopped by now. I have stopped taking steroids, he defended himself. That's because it's been months since you have been to the gym. I don't like to see you destroy yourself. I hope you understand that. I have nothing to gain out of restricting you from your addictions. It's just that I don't want anything to happen to you. Nothing is going to happen to me. Okay, fine, he said. You stop talking to Varun, I will stop smoking. That's a fair deal? What? How is that even connected? You are addicted to Varun. I am addicted to my cigarettes. You leave him, I will quit smoking. I am not comfortable with you being friends with your ex boyfriend, and you are not comfortable with my smoking habit. It sounds fair to me. You talk to Smita too, Dushyant. I have never pointed my finger at that. Fine, I will stop talking to her. I never call her anyway, but you do call Varun. There are times you put my call on hold to pick up his. Sometimes you talk till the dead of night or early morning. What do I make of all this? If you need more friends, why not someone else? Why do you have to be friends with your ex boyfriend, of all people? Dushyant accused. It wasn't the first time Dushyant was being paranoid about Kajal still being friends with Varun, her best friend for the longest time and a boyfriend for 2 years. You are being childish. I have told you a million times that there is nothing between us. He is just a friend and will always be, Kajal asserted. She thought about all the times Dushyant had got drunk and harped on about how he hated Varun with every cell in his body. I don't think so. Why don't you just accept that you still have feelings for him? He shrugged, trying to act as if he didn't care. Kajal knew he did. It didn't take long for Dushyant to change from being nonchalant about something to start breaking things. I don't. He's a friend. I have known him for 15 years. How can I just stop talking to him? Why can't you? He dumped you. He was dating someone else while he was still dating you. I don't understand how you can forgive him. Don't you have a speck of self respect? I just don't like the fact that you have forgiven him so easily. How could he do that to you? He doesn't even respect you, Dushyant grumbled. The movie ended and they exited the movie hall. Kajal felt odd as Dushyant walked in front of her and didn't even hold the door open. Clearly, he wasn't pleased. Our relationship was not working. I don't blame him, she reasoned. You don't blame him? You spent days crying for him. I spent days crying because he left. I felt alone and lonely. Not because I missed him as a boyfriend, but because I missed him as a friend. I had no one to go to. And now that you have me, you still miss him? How does that work? You have a boyfriend. You shouldn't need him. Dushyant argued as they entered a coffee shop. All this time, he walked 3 steps ahead of her, not meeting her eye and behaving like they weren't together. The waiter promptly rushed towards them and Dushyant swatted him away rudely. The shocked waiter lingered on. Water, Kajal indicated to the waiter, and a cappuccino for him. Dushyant picked up the menu and acted as if the conversation was over. He means nothing to me. Believe me, he's just a friend, and it doesn't matter if I talk to him. I love you, and nothing changes that. Well, I'm fine. Whatever. You talk to him, you sleep with him. I don't care. That's just unfair. Whatever, Dushyant said. Can we not talk about this? Dushyant didn't bring up the topic again that evening. The rest of the evening, he was rude to her. They went back to his friend's flat and slept there. Dushyant was rough with her that night. For a change, they weren't making love, they were having sex. There were no intermittent, passionate love yous exchanged during the course. There were just grunts and groans. It was almost like he wanted to hurt her physically. He didn't hung her to sleep. Kajal hoped he would be okay the next day, but it only became worse. The next evening, Dushyant was drunk out of his wits again. Old monk, Smirnov, Chivasrikal. He called Kajal and told her, You love him, I love this. I will never quit drinking or smoking. He called her names, abused her family and Varun, and disconnected the call. Later that night, Dushyant's friends called her to give her the address to the hospital he was admitted to. He had passed out and was frothing at the mouth. Kajal filled out the paperwork in the hospital the next day and got him back to the hostel. It was the first time she had had to bring him back from the hospital that month. Within that month, it happened thrice. Each subsequent time, it was worse. By now, Kajal was used to his drunken tantrums, the abuses, the name calling, the threats. She had become used to everything. It was the price for true love, she told herself. There wasn't a fourth time. A few days later, he crossed a line he shouldn't have. Her patience was tested, and she didn't think she had the strength to carry on. She vowed she would never go back to him. Kajal lay with her head on the pillow, her thoughts going back to every time Dushyant had said they would last and that he would never hurt her. She believed in him. It was all lies. The memories of the days they had broken up were imprinted on her brain, and she knew she would never forget what had happened. That day, Kajal's phone had been lying unattended, and he had seen pictures and text messages that were more than a year old. He had not reacted at first, but as the night progressed, he started to get drunk and angry. He hadn't talked much. Shot after shot was downed. His eyes were bloodshot. Later that night, after an argument, he had struck Kajal on her face while he cried and howled like an animal. Everyone, friends of both Dushyant and Kajal, had watched helplessly as she fell and hit the chair, reeling from the impact of his heavy hand on her face. He had locked himself in a room. All his friends had banged on the door relentlessly, scared that he might overdose inside. Kajal had pleaded with him to open the door. He had let her inside. There were no words exchanged. For the first time, Dushyant had forced himself on her. He had paid no regard to her cries and pounded her with disdain. He had treated her worse than a whore and violated her repeatedly. Once done, he had rolled over, drunk from the bottle of vodka, and passed out. A crying Kajal had left the flat and got back home. She had texted Dushyant, telling him they were over and he was dead to her. For the next 6 days, he had kept calling her. With every missed call, Kajal's temper had risen. Her decision to stay away from him had strengthened. Tired and angry, she had told him that she had never loved him and that she was thinking of getting back with Varun. The calls had stopped immediately. Again, she had no one to talk to. After fiddling with her phone for hours, she dialed Varun's number. You have me, you don't need him. Dushyant used to tell her. Lies. Hi Varun, Kajal said, fighting her tears. Hey, long time? Where have you been? You don't pick up my calls. You don't call me back. I dropped you about a million texts. What's the problem? Dushyant never liked you. You know that, right? Yes, I never liked him either. He asked you to stop talking to me, didn't he? That narrow minded bastard. I don't know what you're doing with him. Really, he is worse than the Taliban. Varun joked. Yes, he asked me to stay away from you, but it's okay. No boyfriend likes the ex boyfriends of their girls. But your guy is very childish. He is immature and hot tempered. He is not right for you. Varun preached like he always did. Kajal choked on her words. Are you there? Varun asked. Are you okay? Yes, we broke up a few days back. Oh, you did? Why? He hit me. What? That bastard. How could he? What else did he do? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Wait, I'm coming over, Varun said and disconnected the call before Kajal could respond. He texted her to ask whether she was at her college, hostel, or home. A little voice inside her wanted to ask Varun to stay away, but it was silenced by the tears that trickled down her face. Kajal needed her best friend. She tied her hair back loosely and ran her fingers on her cheek, where Dushyant's hand had struck, fair and square. Her pale, white skin still bore the marks of his rough hand. Dushyant was a strong guy, and he had not tried to restrain himself when he had slapped her. She saw Varun park his car in the parking lot of the Defense Colony Market. The car number ended with 0002, like every one of Varun's family's cars. Varun belonged to a family with means. His father owned one of the biggest printing presses in Delhi. Within the first year, Varun's sharp business acumen landed them their first multinational clients and helped them grow at a faster rate than his father had imagined. Their 200-acre plant swelled to 600 acres. The number of workers tripled, and they had more clients flying in from Europe and North America than any other printing setup in the country. Varun had transformed a Lala type family business into a seething, angry corporate giant. Contrary to what Kajal thought of him at first, he was not just another rich pretty boy in an Audi A4 labeled dad's gift on the rear windshield. He was ambitious and cutthroat. He worked 18 hours a day, traveled extensively for business, and took his work very seriously. Kajal liked that in him, but it was also the root of discord between them. The meetings, the late night flights, the investor presentations, the bank loan agreements. Between all this, he never had time for Kajal. For the major part of their relationship, Kajal was too awestruck to notice his absolute lack of commitment to the relationship. Kajal had always wondered what he saw in her. They broke up when he slept with someone on a business tour to Shillong. She didn't think the breakup was because he slept with someone else. They had drifted apart long before that. What surprised her was her indifference to his betrayal. Without waking anyone, Kajal sneaked out of her place. "How are you doing?" Varun asked. He looked as if he had aged 10 years in one. "Long hours in the office," she guessed. He had even lost some hair. "I'm good, much better now," she said. "How's work?" "Let's sit and talk," he said and led the way to the nearest subway outlet. "Eating healthy these days?" she mocked. "Doctor advised me to. He has asked me to start exercising too. But who has the time?" "You don't, for sure," Kajal taunted. "You should take care of your health. You look like you have a couple of kids already." Varun shrugged. "So tell me, what happened?" he asked. Kajal narrated her side of the story. She broke down a couple of times and realized that everyone had turned towards them. He listened patiently, ignoring all the uninvited looks from the nearby tables. Varun finished the salad and they walked towards his car. She didn't want to cry in public. A girl like her, pretty and docile, why did she have to cry at all? "Will you be okay?" Varun asked as they sat in the car. "I think so," she said and dug her face into her palms and wept. "I still can't believe he hit you." "He was drunk," she murmured. She didn't tell him the whole story. "Whatever the case may be, you are in an abusive relationship, Kajal. Before this, he used to shout at you and threaten you. Now he has hit you. If you let him get away with this, he will keep doing it. First to you, then to the others he dates after you. You have to realize that he is mentally unfit to be in a relationship. He has no sense of boundaries. Hell, he doesn't even respect your privacy. You have got to see that. The sooner you do, the better it will be for you. It's a good thing you broke up. You just can't be in such a restrictive relationship." "I don't want to talk about it anymore," she said and tried to hold back the tears. Varun hugged her and told her that everything would be all right. She wanted to believe him like she had believed him earlier, like she had believed Dushyant. For the next few days, Varun often dropped in after college timings to check in on Kajal. She was doing better, but she still missed Dushyant. She felt bad for herself that she did. Dushyant, on the other hand, tried his best to apologize and make things better. Kajal told him she didn't want to hear a word from him. Dushyant stopped trying after he spotted Kajal get into Varun's car one day. He called her that night, abused her, and called her a slut. He told her that she must have cheated on him, that she was sleeping with Varun and all the time. Kajal spent the next day crying. Varun was there to hold her hand and to kiss her. She kissed Varun back. She was no longer in a restrictive, abusive relationship with a guy with an appalling lack of respect for her. She had broken free and walked right back into her past.